Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Valley Gives 2017 Orientation Webinar. My name is Michael DeChiara, and I'm the Senior Program Officer for Capacity. And in that position, I oversee and coordinate the Valley Gives program. So I'm joined here today with Margaret Everett, who's also part of the Valley Gives team. So we're hoping to make this an informative session, and I appreciate you taking time out in the morning to do that. Just a couple orientation things. We're thinking this might take about an hour and a half, which I recognize is a little bit long, but there's a lot of information. The other thing is that this will be recorded, so if you want to revisit it at a later point, or if there's a colleague that isn't able to participate that you want them to experience the webinar and get the information, they can do that probably starting somewhere in the next few days. There are some handouts. If you look on the lower right-hand box, it'll say handouts, and you can either download those while we're doing the webinar, or I believe, well, I guess probably during the webinar you can download them, but it includes the PowerPoint and a couple other materials that I'll be mentioning. The slides are also on the Valley Gives website currently, so everything that you're going to be seeing today you can either download while we're talking or after the fact if you want to. And I think the only other thing is just a quick PSA. The Community Foundation is doing an outreach session to provide an overview of the grants programs that we have, and that'll be next week, February 9th. It'll be in the West Springfield Public Library from 9:30 to 11:30. And I believe there's a sign up on our website. So if you go to the Community Foundation website, you can look for the outreach session and just sign up there. So I think with that, we'll just jump in and start talking. So what we're going to cover today is at the beginning just a review of Valley Gives 2016. And I wanted to do this just to provide some information about what last year looked like. I know that we found it pretty informative looking at the information, and hopefully it will be informative for you as well. And then that's a setup to talking about Valley Gives 2017. And some of the things I like to go over, what the goals are for this coming Valley Gives. They are different from last year. The eligibility, and just that's a matter of just clarifying so that as organizations are interested in participating, it's clear from the get-go who can participate in Valley Gives and what's required in terms of documentation. Some of you may know that we changed from the Razoo platform to the Kimbia platform. So we'll go over that and some of the implications of what that means. The registration process, then we'll go into prizes, and because there's always questions about prizes, we're going to take a break then. In terms of questions, if you have a question on the right-hand side of your screen, you can ask a question, and Margaret is going to be looking over the questions, and we'll take a break after we've talked about prizes to see if there's any questions. Then we'll proceed on to the donation process, organizational profiles, which you set up, trainings, and next steps. So that's sort of what the morning will look like. So the question is, why a mandatory training? And there's a few things. We learned about the platform so that everyone is comfortable having some general sense of what you're stepping into. Learning about the new prizes. There are different prizes this year than last year. Some are carryover and the same, but others are different. Understanding the rules and eligibility, as I mentioned, just going through the process, and we will have a more detailed webinar closer to Valley Gives Day, but to understand the process generally now in terms of registration, and then just to review the trainings that are available to organizations. So to review 2016, last year we had a total of 9,596 donors. Those are unique individuals. And what was really interesting is that almost half of them were new donors to Valley Gives. And there was a lot of discussion. Last year was the first year that we moved Valley Gives to May. Previously it had been in December. We moved it because enough nonprofits had asked us to do so, because the end of the year is just a busy time for many people. And there was some conflict with end of year fundraising. So we did it in May. We were wondering what effect that would have. And it actually ended up being a positive thing in the sense that many people who do end of year giving are going to do it anyway. So we ended up picking up people who weren't engaging prior. So that was a nice development, and it was nice to see. We got a total of 19,000 plus online donations, 18,000 to single organizations. So people were making multiple donations to different organizations. And then in terms of organizations, there were 454 organizations across the Pioneer Valley who participated, and their offices were located in 53 towns and cities in the valley. In terms of money, the foundation basically contributes $185,000 in prizes, which really are grants, to all of you. And that $185,000 really leveraged $1.6 million. That's new money that came in because of Valley Gives. So it's pretty significant. The one thing I wanted to highlight down towards the bottom in the red circle is last year was the first year that we gave donors the opportunity to pick up the processing fees. And, there was discussion. It seems like there's always discussion and opinion shared about is it a good thing or a bad thing. It turns out it raised $70,000 extra. So what that meant is if someone was going to donate to your organization and give you $100, rather than getting 90 and change, you got the full 100, and they contributed the processing fees. So we're going to continue doing that this current year, just because that's bringing more money into the system and gets more money directly into your organizational pockets. So where did donations come from? There's 70 towns and cities in the Pioneer Valley, and donations came from 68 of them. So this year our goal, and collectively, is to see if we can make sure that someone from Holland and Monroe participate, so we can get 70 out of 70, which would be great. In terms of Massachusetts, there were donations from 202 towns and cities across the state, and there's a total of 351 towns and cities in Massachusetts. So we did pretty good, 270 out of 351. We also got donations to Valley Gives from every state, including Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico, and 8 countries. We had people who were in the military who were based overseas who made donations as well. So it really speaks to the fact that this is an online event and that people across the world are participating. And then, if you have a connection to the Valley, there's a reason you can participate in Valley Gives. It really sort of speaks to getting beyond our geographical location in terms of asking. Distribution of donors, this is just another way of looking at it. Hampshire County had about half of the donations, then Hamden County and Franklin County, most likely because of the population, was less, and then you see the breakouts as I described. And again, this is by town. These are the top towns where donations came from, which we just thought was instructive. One of the more powerful things that we discovered is that if you look at donations, the average donation was $25. And what that really tells us and really helped inform this year is that Valley Gives is not a large dollar event. So while you see on the bottom that there were 37 donations of $1,000 or more, that's 37 out of 19,000 donations. So very, very few. And that, I think, really helped inform how we want to reach out to people going forward, that we should engage people where they're at and acknowledge that if $25 is the average donation, how do we build upon that rather than try to increase the amount of the donation? In terms of donations to organizations, the average donations per organization were 39. The median was 22. And it sort of broke about 50-50. So 54% of organizations raised more than $1,000 and 46% raised less than $1,000. And for those who raised more, it could have been quite significantly more, tens of thousands. And then I think this is the last 2006 slide, but there were 454 organizations, as I said. The breakout in terms of participation was Hampshire and Hamden were about the same, and then Franklin less. The organizations that were outside of the Pioneer Valley, that's because we do have organizations who have their home office outside of the Pioneer Valley but are serving the Pioneer Valley, and we can get to that in eligibility, but that's the reason for those stats there, just shy of 10%. So what's new in 2017? One of the things is that we changed the URL. So for those of you who have participated before, The old URL, valleygivesday.org, it's going to forward, but the new URL we're using for the giving day is valley-gives.org. As I mentioned, we're using Kimby as a new platform, which I'll go over. We have new prizes and a new prize structure, some new rules, and then just clarity about eligibility documentation. So that's just highlighting some of the new things that are coming this year. So this slide probably sets the stage for some of our thinking. So last year, based on the stats, we would say the Valley Gives was very successful. And as you see in the middle of the slide, there were 9,596 donors. So that's great. But if you look at the population of the Pioneer Valley and the adult population, which is 560,000 plus and 265,000 households, there's a lot of room to grow. And sustainability for all the nonprofits in the Valley really is about reaching out and growing the base and engaging more people. So what we wanted to do going forward this year with this recognition is build upon the success of Valley Gives from last year and try to figure out how to engage more of those people who are not engaging in Valley Gives. Because if we can do that, we can get people building relationships with your organizations and hopefully providing money to your organizations. So there's 3 goals that we had set up, and again, they're premised on the previous slide. The first one is to expand the breadth of participation, and what that means is that we're changing the metrics of success from dollars raised to people touched and people engaged in participating. And while it's true that everyone who's running an organization needs actual dollars to run the organization, and I know that firsthand, what's also true is that you need a pipeline of donors and that getting people in the door to support your organizations is costly. So this is one way to help reach out to new people. It begins relationship building. So if they don't give money, maybe they'll volunteer, maybe they'll have awareness. But by identifying them and engaging them and bringing them in, the broader the base, because donors will fall off, that we want to increase how many people you're touching. So that's one of the things in terms of what we're shooting for. The other is to bring new donors to your organization, which is related, but it's worth calling out only in that with Razoo, the previous foundation, the technology was such that they could capture who was new to Valley Gives, but not to your particular organization. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if they're new to Valley Gives. What really matters is if they're new to your organization and you're building your relationships. So we wanted to be pretty clear about that. And then third, I think something everybody is trying to figure out is how to engage younger donors, so under 40 in particular. As donors age, you need this pipeline of newer people. The research shows that, younger donors are more apt to volunteer. They're not giving large donations, which gets us back to the $25 donation fact. And we wanted to structure it so that while everyone's sort of figuring out how do you reach younger donors, that we set up the prize pool and the goals for Valley Gives to really sort of push us all in that direction. So those are the 3 goals and the rationale before that. So last year, Margaret and I did some feedback sessions in the 3 counties after Valley Gives to just get input from everybody about what worked well, what didn't. And one of the things that stood out is there was some confusion about where to find information. So this slide is really intended to sort of point you in the right direction. So there's 2 websites that we have. The first one is labeled for organizations. It's the communityfoundation.org at Valley Gives. And that's really the behind the scenes. So, today is February 2nd and Valley Gives is May 2nd. So we've got a long way, 90 days approximately. And the information we're going to be pushing out about rules and prizes and trainings and videos and logos and all that stuff is really sort of the plumbing and the wiring behind Valley Gives. So we'll be using the communityfoundation.org website to provide all of that. It's things that donors don't need to see, but that you need to see to have a successful Valley Gives Day. And then valleygives.org, which is the new URL that I mentioned earlier, that's really for donors. And I'll get into a little bit. There will be some advanced giving, so before Valley Gives, shorter than last year. But really, valleygives.org is for donors on the day of Valley Gives. That's where the action will be. That's where the leaderboards will be. So when you're pushing information out to donors or potential donors, you'll be letting them know about valleygives.org. But as you're leading up to the day and looking to the foundation for information, you would go to the communityfoundation.org website. And this is one of the handouts, so if you want to print that out and keep it. Oops. So in terms of eligible organizations, last year I know Margaret and I, it was our first Valley Gives, and there was some confusion when people ask us questions, so we wanted to be really clear on the front end. So there's two main categories of eligibility. The first one is an organization is eligible if they have a primary office in either Hampden, Hampshire, or Franklin counties, and they serve a population in at least one of these counties. So you can have your primary office here and not be serving the area, in which case you wouldn't be eligible. It's really focused on improving the quality of life in the Pioneer Valley and supporting the nonprofits who do that. So that's the first category. And then the second would be, you would be eligible if you have a primary office located outside the Pioneer Valley, but are actively serving a population of people in one of the counties. And the thing that's important to know here is, if, for example, there was a Boston-based organization or a Worcester-based organization who said that they would like to serve the Pioneer Valley, if they're not currently doing it, they wouldn't be eligible for Valley Gives. You actually have to be providing service currently to register. And if they weren't doing it, they could wait a year and then establish the services and then come in next year if that would be helpful. The example of an organization based outside that would be eligible, for example, is Western Mass Legal Services, probably about 10 years ago, combined with Central Mass Legal Services and moved the offices to Worcester. So they've had a long-standing history of serving the region and continue to serve the region, but their main office is now in Worcester. So they would be eligible to participate in Valley Gives. Hopefully that is all making sense. In terms of types of organizations, again, this was something we wanted to clarify because it wasn't necessarily clear last year. For Valley Gives, 501c3 organizations are definitely eligible to participate, and that's the easiest one, most straightforward type of organization to be. You can also be an entity that's fiscally sponsored by a 501c3. So you don't have to be incorporated yourself, you just have to have a fiscal sponsor who is a 501c3. The one specific thing to call out there is that if you're a religious organization, a church, a synagogue, etc., if you're local, there's a high likelihood that you might be operating under an umbrella of a 501c3 organization. So for example, there are local churches who are working under the 501c3 of the Diocese of Western Mass. And so those organizations require some documentation just to establish that they're connected with that 501c3. It's not really fiscal sponsorship, but there's a link. It's a similar concept. And then the other type of eligibility to call out is public schools. And so all public schools in the country have this NCES number that basically is federally assigned. And that would mean that any public school in the Pioneer Valley, in the K-12 system, if they have an NCES number, they can participate in Valley Gives. So that's something that was possible last year, but was not necessarily clear. So shifting gears to the Kimbia platform. Kimbia has been around for a while. It's the national leader in hosting Giving Days, which is what Valley Gives is. They're also the host of Give Local America Day, which happens to be May 2nd as well. So on May 2nd, I believe there'll be 14 Giving Days happening around the country. Valley Gives will continue to be very locally focused and we'll have our own branding and our own focus, but there is some benefit to being part of something that's bigger. It is very different from Giving Tuesday, which is much more dispersed. So Valley Gives will look and feel like it always has, but we'll be working with Kimbia, who has deep knowledge. Much will stay the same. They'll provide each organization that's participating in Valley Gives with your own page that you can maintain, and we'll go through that towards the end. And similar in terms of donations. So previously with Razoo, if a donor made a donation, they actually were making a donation to the Razoo Foundation, which was a nonprofit. And then the Razoo Foundation would send a check to your organizations after the fact, after Valley Gives Day. Similar with Kimbia, Kimbia has the Kimbia Foundation. So when a donor on May 2nd makes a donation, they're actually doing their credit card donation to the Kimbia Foundation. They'll get their tax exempt credit that way, and then the Kimbia Foundation will send your organizations a check. So although the players have changed, and we made the decision to shift because we thought it was beneficial for a variety of reasons, the core dynamics of having your page and how donations work are the same. In terms of money, Kimbia sends organizations checks the 15th of the month following Valley Gives. So in this case, it would be June 15th. So everyone should be getting their checks from Valley Gives by approximately June 15th or sooner. One change is that they don't do electronic fund transfers, which Rezu did. So everyone will be getting a check. And the processing fee is less than last year. And this has been something that people have talked about, so I wanted to be real transparent that 3% is for the credit card processing. So Kimbia, just like Rezu or anyone else doing online, has a credit card processing company they partner with, and that really isn't negotiable. They charge what they charge. And then the 2.99% is for Kimbia, and that's where they fund all the activities for the website and the functionality that we're buying. Last year it was 6.99, so one of the compelling reasons, besides more flexibility and I think a better product, it was also cheaper for donors and or organizations. And again, we can get into it, but donors can cover the fee just like they could with Rezu, which I would encourage everyone to consider getting that word out, because it looks like if we made $70,000 from this, that donors do not have a problem contributing the extra, $6 essentially. So if they gave you $100, they'd be paying $106, and you would end up getting $100 in your pocket. So shifting gears to prizes. We're going to offer a range of prizes, and I think the thing that I want to say before we jump into the details is that they're really designed to expand the donor base and increase fundraising and motivate donors. So Valley Gives exists in totally to support nonprofits and sustainability. And so we're trying to figure out ways that move us forward as a region and create more sustainable and expanded fundraising. There's going to be two kinds of prizes. Some prizes will reward specific accomplishments that I'll go over in a minute. And then other prizes will be randomly awarded, which is similar to what happened in years past. Both of those things were true. And you'll see there's a lot of different kinds of prizes, and our suggestion would be select one or two or three categories of prizes that works for your organization. It's either a place you want to grow and sort of figure out how to do something. It might be reaching younger people, or that's in your wheelhouse, something that you're good at. But I don't think it's really practical to try to get all the prizes, and you'll see as we go through it that there's some differentiation there. So the next two slides really go over the prizes, and there's a summary is one of the handouts that you can download, and we'll get it up to on the website in the next couple of days as well. But we wanted to group them in ways that made sense. So this first grouping is, and just to remind you, after we do these next two slides, we'll take a break for questions, because our experience is that people have a lot of questions and want clarification about the prizes. So the first category is the most, and we're looking at most unique donors. And just like last year, we're going to break out organizations by budget size, so small, medium, and large. And that's really a proxy for capacity, with the idea being that we want to be somewhat fair. So if you're an all volunteer organization, you're most likely going to have less capacity than, say, a $2 million organization that has a development department and lots of infrastructure. So the prizes in many of these categories will be broken out by the budget size. So most unique donors, the prizes will be for the top 3 organizations that get the most unique donors. And there is a slide later about what a unique donor is, but it really is just an individual. And then we wanted to have a separate prize for most donors under 40, and again, for the top 3 organizations by budget size. This is, I'd say, almost complete draft of the prizes. We have a little bit of refinement to do in terms of how many prizes per category, et cetera. And I want to just call out that I think that most likely an organization could not win both of these prizes, and we just have to figure that out. But there will be prizes both for unique donors generally and then for donors under 40. Moving on to the next category, it's all relative. What we want to do is help everyone increase the percentage of donors, so not just the number of donors, but the percentage, which really is regardless of the budget size. You could be really small and make a huge increase in your donors versus a large organization that has number-wise a lot of new donors, but percentage-wise is not great. And this will be 3 organizations regardless of budget size. For those organizations who participated in Valley Gives last year or years prior, we do have the number of donors to your organization, so we'll have that as a benchmark, and the percentage will be above that. Moving to connect the dots, this is one of the new things in terms of categories of prizes. The first one is trying to support that whole idea that we're wanting to engage more people across the valley, so in all the small towns and cities that we have. So donors who get the most donations, the top 3 organizations with donations from across towns and cities, and this is going to be only for small and medium budget organizations. So, you know, whether it's 5 or 10 or 15, as I mentioned, we've got 70 towns and cities in the Pioneer Valley. So the broader the reach, and one of the reasons for this is we wanted to send a message to donors that if they're living in an outlying, you know, small town, their donation really matters, you know, and that we want them to feel like you want to reach out to them. And it helps engage different communities that might otherwise think that, oh, this is not about us. It's only for people who live in the bigger population centers. The other new prize category is donors by decades. And this is designed to really sort of expand the reach into younger donors. So it's organizations that get donors from 4 decades of age. And just to speak about that in a minute, how we'll capture that. But 2 of the decades must be under 49/50. And there'll be 1 prize for that at the current time. One of the things with Kimby, it's more flexible. And so when Margaret and I did the feedback sessions last year, we were somewhat surprised to realize that the donation form didn't have any information about age. There's no demographic information for the donation. And we got a range of feedback, some people saying if you ask for people's ages, they won't give money. But we're living in a world of data where we're trying to make decisions. And if we're trying to reach younger donors, we actually have to know who's giving money and how old they are. So on the donation form, we're going to be having a field that is completely optional. And it'll be by age range. So it'll be 18 and 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, et cetera. And really it's up to you, the organizations, to communicate with potential donors to say, you don't have to fill out this field, but if you fill it out, it will help contribute to us potentially getting a prize. From the foundation perspective, we think that, you know, if they're willing to help you, and it's a 10-year span essentially, that people will be willing to do that, but they don't have to. But it's data that we can then all benefit from when we're looking back about who's giving and how they're giving. And then the match pool, we did this last year, so it's a carryover. The twist this year is last year we had 2 categories, people who had a match of $2,500 and people who had a match of $5,000. This year we're just going to create 1 pool, and it's up to the organization to figure out where that match should fall within the range. Last year there were organizations that maybe they had $3,500 or $4,000 in match, and they had to make a decision. Do we try to go up and get another 1,000 to reach the 5,000, or do we just use part of the match? And the way this will work is any organization at the time that Valley Gives Day starts that has a match in place and then meets it will be entered into a pool, and then organizations will be randomly selected. So the dynamics are such that if you had $2,500 match and then you got another $2,500 in donations to meet that match, you would be entered into the pool. If the organization was selected from the random selection, the foundation would then provide the same amount of money. So in this case, $2,500. So you'd end the day with $7,500. We're pretty convinced that matches are a good way to motivate donors. And, if you end up getting the randomly selection, it definitely is a good chunk of money in the organizational pocket. So that's the first part. We're going to the second part. There's a category, what's new, and these are most new donors and for existing Valley Gives organizations that had participated previously. So like I said, we know from years past how many donors gave to each organization, and this would it wouldn't be a percentage, but it would be most new donors. So if you had 100 donors last year, maybe you get 25 new donors, and that would be 3 prizes per budget size. We also wanted to make it fair because there are organizations that'll participate who have not participated in Valley Gives previously, and so those will just be the 3 Valley Gives organizations that are new that got the most donors because they don't have a baseline. So just again, trying to underscore that we're trying to expand the reach and get new donors in for all of you guys. The next 2 categories are random. The first one of these is the last donation of the night, and Kimbia basically tracks when they come in. So the very last donation on Valley Gives Day or night will win a donation, win a prize. And then same as the previous years, there's golden tickets and power hours, and the only difference there is one's $500 and one's $1,000. The change that we made this year that's worth pointing out is in years past, all donations up until that hour were considered in the pool for a golden ticket or a power hour, and we're going to narrow that down to within the hour. And what I mean by that is if someone made a donation at 6 in the morning and we had a power hour at 11, that 6 o'clock donation in previous years would have been part of the pool, and if it was picked, would have won. And really what we're saying now is that if we're having a power hour at 11, the donations between 10:01 through 11 will be considered. So it's really a way to sort of motivate donors to say, if you're given this hour, we will be positioned. So the pool of organizations you're competing against will be smaller because there's less organizations giving them 1 hour, and it's more compelling for the donors. And then finally, the Because You Are You category. These are all random. This year, when you register, you'll see that you can identify the categories of so the content area that you work in within the sector, whether it's you're doing environmental work or you're doing human service work or you're doing the arts. And each organization, when you register, will have the ability to identify 1 primary category and then 4 secondary categories. So for this, it'll be a random drawing by primary category. So one organization that's working on the environment will get pulled and will win a prize, and one organization who's doing arts will get pulled. So it's just a way of acknowledging the different sectors within the whole nonprofit sector in the Valley. We're also going to give out randomly selected prizes for each, oops, I got a typo there, at 70 towns and cities in the Valley. So again, if you have a donor who's living in Shelburne or Tolland or Wales, that if they donate, they're in the pool, and if their donation went to you and their donation is selected, your organization will get a prize associated with that. So we really want to acknowledge that donations all across the Valley matter, as they should. They are supporting the quality of life in the Valley and your organizations. And then lastly, random by county, just to acknowledge that we have 3 counties participating. And the one thing I do know is that if your organization wins a town and city random prize, you won't be eligible to win the random by county, just because we want to spread that around. So I think, yep. So why don't we stop there? And Margaret, do we have any questions that?
We have a couple of questions. The first question is asking you to clarify the definition of small, medium, and large organizations.
Okay. Good question. So we won't know what the breakout is between small, medium, large. It really is dependent upon who registers and what the budgets are. But you will know before Valley Gives Day. Registration closes on April 16th. So somewhere probably in the week following, we'll, on the back end, look at everyone's budgets and figure out what the categories are and let you know. but the intent is really to make it fair so that, as an example, last year we had 171 organizations that had budgets of under $100,000. So they were clearly in the small category. They should not be competing with organizations that have $1 million plus. So really trying to find the category breakout that is as close to possible fair. We've already been looking at it and thinking about it, and having 3 breakouts, it's still a challenge. You know, if you had 5 or 10, it'd be easier, but that's just not practical to manage. But as I said, we'll know by April 16th when registration closes, and then we'll convey that to you.
We have another question that's kind of related to that, and that is wondering if you're a program of a larger parent organization, is your overall budget categorized by the size of your overall organization budget or by the program budget?
That is a great question, and I think that's probably one that Margaret and I should write down, and we're building an FAQ page on the Valley Gives website, the one for organizations. There's definitely in the past, using, say, CHD as an example, there are lots of programs up and down the valley that CHD runs and have participated. And I just want to confirm this, but in the past, the way we've done it has been the program. So if you're a small program and you're part of a bigger organization, what we're trying to do is have the budget reflect capacity. So if you're just running out on your own and there's not a lot of support, most likely it would be your program budget, but I think we'll just have conversations to clarify that, and then we'll post it on the FAQ. But great question.
Another one asks if you have multiple programs of a parent organization, can they all participate to register?
Right. So in that regard, just referring to the previous answer, everyone can. So again, using the CHD example, I don't know how many programs CHD has, but there are a lot. They're, I think, in all of the counties. And so historically, those organizations have participated. And last year, which is probably a question, CHD also as itself participated. So the idea is really to support the nonprofits, and if there's different programs that are essentially having their own identity within the valley in different communities, that they can participate. So we just have to clarify, I think, what the documentation is for that, so that we're very clear. But that should be possible, as it has been in the past.
The next few questions are regarding prizes. Do you have the amounts for each prize category yet?
No, that's one of the things we wanted to roll out and give the thinking behind the prizes and what the prizes would be. We actually did an in-person orientation a couple of days ago, and 1 or 2 people had suggestions about prizes. So I think within the coming weeks, we will finalize it. Definitely before March, we'll have all the prizes listed by the number of prizes and the amount of money per prize. It just takes a little bit of sort of figuring out to make it all work. But the prize money provided by the foundation, which is actually was, I think, it started at 185 last year. We're going to shoot for doing the same thing as we did last year. We just have to figure out the distribution.
Is the random by town and city and by county based on where the organization is or where the donor is from?
Great question. It's going to be based on where the donor is from. So if someone lives in Greenfield and they make a donation, whether the organization they're making, if they are supporting the Dakin, which is based in Springfield, the donation would be generated from the Greenfield. Now it's where people are living.
This one is just clarifying what you said before. If winning the town excludes you from winning the county, for example, should they both be worth the same amount, the prizes?
That is a good reason why we didn't want to finalize, because you all are pretty smart and have good observations. So I think we'll write that down and look at that. But that's why it seemed a little bit premature to figure out what the dollars and amounts for each of the things were before we went too much further and let you know what they are. So we're definitely jotting that one down. It's a good point.
And the last question is, can an organization have a fundraising page and a program within an organization as well. So
Say that
maybe
one again.
it sounds like they're asking if the parent organization can have a fundraising page and the program have a
Got it.
fundraising page.
Okay, so we'll get to what's called the profile pages later, but basically whatever entity is registered to participate in Valley Gives will have its own page. So getting back to the CHD example, for example, if you were family outreach in Amherst, which is a program of CHD, both CHD and family outreach would have their own pages. So any entity that registers will have its own profile page that you can post your stories and your pictures and such. They don't have to be a subset.
And the last is a comment just saying if we know in advance the amounts of the prizes, it will help us to decide which prize to go for.
Yes, totally. And like I said, we just didn't want to do it for this orientation because there was some calculating, but totally. I think that's all the prize stuff is about strategy. And just sort of to circle back to what I said before we got into that discussion was I don't think it's practical for every organization to try to get every prize. So it's a matter of streamlining. And I totally agree that if you know how much it's worth, you're going to make a calculation about should we go in that direction or not. So we're going to try to get that information out very quickly. We've already done a lot of it. We just didn't want to finalize it. So I think we're ready to go on. And if there's other questions, we'll do them at the end. I just want to make sure that we respect everybody's time. It is 10:40, so I think we're doing pretty good. So donations, how they work. As I mentioned earlier, basically if someone makes a donation through Valley Gives, they're received by the K Foundation, the Kimbia Foundation, which is its own 501c3, and that's how that person gets their tax-exempt credit. So the next couple of bullets are from Kimbia, but they're sort of the technical stuff, but they make sense. Basically, all the donations that are designated are 100% tax deductible and irrevocable. They won't be refunded. And when they get the receipt will be the donation to the Kimbia Foundation. So sometimes people get confused because they're being motivated and want to give to your organization, and that's what they identify, and then they get a receipt from the Kimbia Foundation. And we've had the wording so it refers to Valley Gives, but your organization won't be part of it because if they were to get tax credit for a Kimbia Foundation and your organization, they'd be getting double the credit, which would not be appropriate. Donations are only done via the website with a credit card and debit card. And I just wanted to share some of our thinking. Valley Gives is an online program, but we fully, and especially given what we've been talking about, reaching out to younger people and people who live across the valley, that what we're hoping to do is make Valley Gives a day of giving. And we know, especially with younger people, that they might not be giving, but they're willing to give their time. So what we wanted to encourage is that if you want to do a volunteer event, tying it to Valley Gives, whether it's on the day or before the day, but just creating a sensibility that giving happens on Valley Gives Day. You can give in many different ways. We also know from talking to people last year that many organizations get checks. There was one organization who made about $50,000 last year, and much of that was people either walking in or mailing in checks. So the reality is if your organization is getting money connected to Valley Gives, that's a good thing, and we like that. It's just that in terms of this platform, and mostly all the online platforms, they can only really work with credit and debit card. So what we wanted to just convey to you is that if someone wants to give you money, we should validate them, as a nonprofit sector for supporting your work and caring about your work. It's just that it doesn't get counted for Valley Gives, but there's no reason we should not fully appreciate and acknowledge it. And then just the minimum donation has always been $10, and it will continue to be that. So a couple more donation facts. In years past with Razoo, there was what's called advance giving, where people could give before Valley Gives Day. And last year, well, 2 years, two Valley Gives before, in order to do that, people had to set up an account. And the feedback to Razoo at the time was people didn't like creating an account on Razoo. So last year they changed it where you didn't have to have an account, and we were encouraged to expand the period of time. So it was, I think, 3 weeks out. Um, Reflecting back, that seemed like too long of a period. It really sort of diluted Valley Gives Day as the actual day. So somewhere in the next week or two, we're going to set when advance giving will start. It'll probably be 7-10 days at the max, I think is what Kimbia allows people to do. So there will be some ability. People won't have to create an account, and the credit card information, because Kimbia works with a credit card company, won't be stored by Kimbia, but it'll go to the credit card company. And everything that's done in advance, the charges will be processed in the early morning of May 2nd. So someone could go in, if we do advance giving on April 30th, and find your organization, make a donation. Their credit card won't be processed until maybe 2 a.m. on May 2nd. Um, this next bullet point, we just have to clarify this a little bit with Kimbia. Some of the advanced donations won't count towards some of the prizes. Most of them will, but we want to be crystal clear with which ones are which. So when we come out with the final version of the prizes, we'll identify if there's an instance where an advanced donation might not be. And again, getting to the whoever made the point about knowing the value, you also want to be able to be clear about this, because you don't want to encourage donations if for some reason it doesn't go to your prize. So we'll be really crystal clear about that. Again, I mentioned this earlier, but the processing fee for this year is 5.99% per donation, which is 1% less than last year. So we're going in the right direction. And it really is a cheap way to get new donors. And Kimbia is asking 2.99% to support their operations. And I would just encourage, now that we've got a year under our belt of knowing that asking donors to pay for processing fees works, that you should have conversations in your organizations about how you message that. It just means that you're going to be making almost 6% more on each donation if you ask them to cover it than if not. One of the new things we're doing this year, and I'll circle back on this later at another slide, but when people make donations, they'll be able to designate if they're in honor of, in memory of, or in behalf of. So the honor of and memory of are pretty straightforward. What in conversations we've heard back, and it makes sense, is that there are people who either don't have their own credit card, or a parent might be making on behalf of a child who wants to make a donation for something. And I'll circle back on how that counts toward prizes as individuals, but basically there'll be room on the donation form to acknowledge if you're doing this on behalf of someone in one of these ways. So matching gifts. They've been part of Valley Gifts for a while, and they're a hit, and they work, so we're going to keep doing it. The things to know about matching gifts, just like last year, is matching gifts do not need to be made via Kimbia. So they're really an outside agreement that you have. And I know last year organizations had boards, for example, contribute to a matching gift, or maybe you have a large donor who's willing to put forth a matching gift. If someone's putting down, 3 people are putting down $1,000 each, the likelihood that they would like to avoid the processing fee is high. And so if they just write you a check and you can add that to your matching gift total, that's fine. You then, when you register or afterwards, you'll be asked to, if you have a matching gift, to put that amount in, and we'll freeze that before Valley Gives Day. But just to be clear, it doesn't have to run through Kimbia. If it does, it'll go towards the donations that are contributed. So for Valley Gives totals. And matching gifts will start on May 2nd. As I think last year we started them a little earlier, but we'll start them on May 2nd. And to be eligible for a prize, as I explained earlier, it's really up to the organization to figure out where between the $2,500 and the $5,000 your match is, and then meet your match. So there's some strategizing there. But whatever, if you meet it and you're selected, we'll match whatever that total was, whether it was 2,500 or 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000, et cetera. So who is a donor? We wanted to put this slide in here just to be clear, because last year, I will say, there was confusion and people addressed this in different ways. So donor participation, any individual can donate, but a unique donor, when we talk about having unique donors for prizes, they're considered an individual. So a human being that um, is discrete. So whether they have different email addresses or different credit cards or different addresses, if it's the same person, it's just one individual making the donation. Um, we really want it to be that we're trying to engage more people in the valley and get people donated. So we want to make sure that we're counting individuals rather than other data points. Um, and then in terms of in behalf of, for example, we had a lot of conversation about this, but if there was a parent who is making a donation for their child, um, although there's, you can come down in different ways on this, but we basically decided that the donor would be the parent, because the parent would be actually making the donation using their credit card. Um, if the child was over 18 and they had a credit card, they could do it on their own, and then they would be their own person. Um, by contrast, if there was a household with a husband and a wife, and the husband made a donation and the wife made a donation, even though they're living in the same house, even if they share the same email address, they're two separate people making donations. So we want to make sure that as best we can, that individuals are being counted as individuals. So has been tricky in the past, and we've wanted to be really clear about that. So what will the donor experience? As I said at the beginning, donors will be going to the valleygives.org website. They probably won't ever have a reason to go to the other website that's really for organizations. This year, what's going to be nice, and Kimbia has a lot more functionality, people will be able to search by category, the substantive areas that you guys work on, like we were talking about, whether it was human services or the environment or the arts. So there's a total of 16, and people can search by that. They can search by city or town, which is also new, and I'm excited about, because I think that's going to be helpful. And they can also do a free word search. So there'll be a search box on the top that they can type in, and they can search by the name of the organization. Donors are going to find your profile page, and each one will have its own URL. So just like in years past, each organization will have its own URL that you can share on Facebook or email, handwritten note, however, whatever works. But that's how people will find you if they're not browsing. And you can either make a donation, one donation, or Kimbia has a multi-donation form, so they can do it all at once to multiple organizations. Once they're doing the donation, they'll be asked for identifying information, contact information, and payment information. Once they've made that donation, they'll receive an email confirmation from Kimbia pretty immediately, just acknowledging that they did get the donation processed. In terms of the donation form, some of this I've mentioned before, but just to clarify, so it'll only be credit and debit card transactions. Among other things we'll be asking is individual name and email address. One thing that came up at the in-person that we're going to incorporate is having a separate field for the individual name as they like to be called versus the billing name. Sometimes this is as much as your legal name is different from what your nickname is, or in terms of gender identity, they might be different. So we're going to have two separate fields for that. It'll allow for the in honor of, in memory of, and in behalf of, as I mentioned, and it'll allow the donor to pay for the processing fees. Last year, while the processing fee payment was a good thing, some people that Margaret and I heard back from said that it wasn't very clear where that was. So we're going to work with Kimbia to make sure that people can check it and people know what it is when they're agreeing to pay for the processing fees. So there's hopefully no confusion. As I said, you can make multiple donations on the same form. So we're moving along here. The profile page and registration. The link to registration will be posted on that sort of operational Valley Gives website, and registration opens tomorrow, so we'll have that posted. The really nice thing about registration with Kimbia is you can save it, and that little graphic on the lower left is what you'll see. So you don't have to have everything figured out. beforehand, and we will also have a PDF available so that you can download that to see what the questions are. So those will both be available tomorrow. Things to consider before registering, and again, you can save them, so there's things that you don't have to know, but this is just advice. Um, are you a 501c3 or are you fiscally sponsored? We're going to ask for both contact information for the organization's executives, whether it's the executive director or the CEO. And that isn't necessarily the same person who's doing Valley Gives. So we're going to ask for contact for the Valley Gives person as well. There's fields for social media information, so Twitter handles, Facebook profiles, etc. All of that information will show up on your profile page so people can find it if they're looking for you. So again, you don't have to put it in immediately, but it's there. Kimby allows up to 3 images in one video, so you don't have to have that ready when you register because you won't be able to get to your profile page, but just good to know. You will have to know what category, primary category you want to be, and you can change those, but as I said, you'll have 1 primary and 4 others. And then there's some documentation you will need, which is this next slide. And again, we're putting this out now just to reduce some of the confusion and any hassle that you might run into by saying, oh, I didn't know I needed to do that. So 501c3s are pretty straightforward. If you're a 501c3 organization, there's 2 ways that the foundation and Kimbia need to get documentation. All 501c3s probably should be in GuideStar, which is a national organization that has a database of all nonprofits. Sometimes they're not there. I couldn't tell you why, but if you get the GuideStar profile URL and put it in, that would be sufficient because then we and Kimby can look it up and basically verify that you're a 501c3. If for some reason you don't know or don't have a GuideStar profile, you can just upload a digital version of the determination letter. I know that, we've done this before with Razoo, and you might say, well, we've done that before, but Kimbia needs it. So it's just a matter of browsing the file on your computer and uploading it. It's pretty straightforward. For fiscally sponsored organizations, this is something that we wanted to clarify. This year, the foundation standardized how we ask fiscally sponsored organizations, and we now have a fiscal sponsor certification form. It's currently available on the website, and you'll be able to find it and download it. And it identifies what information we need. There's 2 pieces of additional information we'll need for fiscally sponsored entities. One is documentation of board approval from the sponsoring organization. And that could be minutes, it could be a board resolution, but basically the foundation and Kimbia need to know that the organizations that doing the sponsoring has basically said, yes, we agree to fiscally sponsor this entity. So we need something in writing like that. And then we need the audited or reviewed financials for the sponsoring organization. And again, this information will all be up on the website, and all these slides are, so you can get that later if you need it. For the religious organizations, churches, synagogues that are operating under the umbrella of a 501c3, each of these local organizations will have a 4-digit exempt number. So we just need that 4-digit exempt number. And then we'll need what's called a statement of authority. It's sort of similar to a board resolution where the umbrella organization, the church or religious organization, basically says this local has the ability, we're authorizing them to act under a 501c3, and then documentation of a link to the parent organization, which can basically just, I think, be a letter or something that documents that the local is connected to the larger entity. And then for schools, it's as easy as putting in the NCS number, and then Kimbia and the foundation can look it up. So depending on what type you are, there's some documentation. Like I said, what's nice is you can save your registration so you can start the process and then dig up this information, then complete it. The last thing I just wanted to point out is that as part of the registration, we're asking people, Kimbia has a couple of things that they want participating organizations to just check off and agree to. And this is the one thing the foundation added as well. And it's really just asking people to play fairly. That we're hoping that the information provided about your organization and your donors is accurate, and that in terms of the prizes, that both organizationally and the donors are acting with the intent of the prizes, so that there might be confusion, but we really care about the intent. And hopefully we can reduce any confusion, but we just wanted everyone to sort of at the registration process sign off and say, yep, we're in it. We're going to try our best to get you the best information, and we understand the rules to the best of our knowledge. So highlighting this next stuff is just, I think, will reduce some confusion. When you register and you submit, so once you've gotten everything and you click the submit button, you're going to get an email back, but it's a confirmation email. So it doesn't mean that you're registered yet. It just means that we got it, which is also, it's nice to know that, you sent something in and we got it. But what will happen after that happens is the Community Foundation staff and Kimbia staff will review the application both for completeness and eligibility. If there's something missing or if there's a question, we'll follow up. One of us, most likely it'd be Margaret or I. And then once that's all resolved, we'll send an approval email, and that will mean that you're registered. So once you are approved and you get that registration email, then you can work on setting up your profile page. So the profile page, and we're doing well getting to the end. So if anyone's dozing off or getting bored, we're getting there. And I want to thank you for your patience. So on the profile page, this is really where you're going to engage the donors. Kimbia has a framework just because they're doing lots of giving days. So you can, it's a little limited, but within that, you can be as compelling as you want. So you can upload up to 3 images. You can upload 1 video. The linking to the guide star, which happens in registration, I actually think is a very powerful thing if you have it, because a lot of donors these days want actually to understand the information behind your organization, so they can look at your financials, they look at your board. If they click on the link in GuideStar, it goes directly there, and they can see more about all the information about your organization, which in this day and age, donors want to know, the backstory behind the organization as well as what we're telling them. And then it's, of course, the place to tell your story, to be compelling, to tell them why the work you do is great, and why you should be funded and why they should care about the work you do. The one thing I'll say in terms of donation levels, this is something that's going to be set by the foundation for all of Valley Gives, and we haven't done it yet. We're going to do it soon. But it's the, give it $25, $50, $100, $500. Those settings we have to work with Kimbia on setting up, and there's strategy involved. But that'll be consistent across each of the profile pages. And here is an example of a profile page. You probably can't see it, but they'll all have this masthead, the May 2nd Just Cause, which is the branding for Valley Gives this year. On the right-hand side is both a Facebook and a Twitter feed, and then everything on the left-hand side, the main body, is for you to customize. So the circle with the heart is the logo for this test organization. There's the address and the phone number. There's a contact email. There's the website link. There's a GuideStar profile, and then links to whatever social media you put in there, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, etc. The white spot to the right of the logo, that's where you do the compelling story and prose and whatever you want. You can change up the images as you want. There's a total of 3, but they can change over the course of time. And you can put in the video. So that's essentially what it looks like. One nice feature on the lower right is this email reminder that because we'll have advanced giving, people can go to the valleygives.org page and put in their email to be reminded when Valley Gives Day is. So if life is busy for them, which it is for all of us, they'll get a prompt to say, hey, today is Valley Gives Day. And maybe that's something you want to drive people to so that they can remember. One nice thing about Kimbia is all of you will have real-time access to donor information and reports from your account. So you log in, you'll be able to go to your profile page, but there'll be some other options where you can actually click in and see the donor information, and Kimbia generates reports. We have to talk to them about what other reports might be available. That's a subsequent conversation, but you definitely will have real-time access to all the donor information. And I think this is like one of the last slides. In terms of trainings, so from the get-go when we started Valley Gives in 2012, part of it was helping organizations succeed in doing Valley Gives and bringing information forward so that we're creating opportunity, but we're also trying to maximize your success. So today is the webinar, which is at the top. We've got 4 content trainings coming up in February and March. The first one is February 14th, which is at the West Springfield Library, focusing on millennials. And we've been working with 6 Point Creative in our work getting ready for Valley Gives, and they've done a lot of research both at the national and, more importantly, at the local level about how to understand where millennials are at and how they respond, and some messaging that might work or not work. So because that's a barrier that many organizations, including the foundation, have in terms of conveying that information, that should be a pretty good session. We're then going to have a session on March 1st with John Hayden, who is nationally recognized social media expert, who lives in Cambridge and is coming out. That'll be at Holyoke Community College on March 1st. The thing I would say is we've had social media sessions in the past, but social media changes quickly. So what was discussed last year, the year prior, will most likely have some new information this year. So we're looking forward to working with John. The next one on March 9th, we're calling Guerrilla Video. And we did do a video session last year, but it was not focused in the way this one's going to be focused. This is really on how do you make a video on your phone. So most of you don't have lots of information. Most of you don't have an AV video department that can help you. And it's going to go from understanding how it actually works on the phone, the mechanics, all the way through to storytelling. And John's a professional videographer who's really excited about doing this. And then lastly, in terms of the contextual trainings, Eric Phelps, who did a training last year, will be working on messaging and effective Valley Gives appeal. And for those who said, oh, I went last year, it's going to be the same, it won't be the same. He's basing a lot of this stuff on a book by the Heath brothers called Stick. And the idea is trying to convey messages that actually stick with people, and also with the framework of millennials and this bigger idea of reaching more people across the Valley. And one of the things that we're pretty aware of is that this is Valley Gives' 5th year of operation. And so we don't want to create donor burnout. We don't want to tap the same usual suspects. The whole idea is to sort of engage other people. The way I like to explain it is, sometimes on Halloween, people want to close the lights and hide in the back room because they're overwhelmed with Halloween. We don't want that to be the case with Valley Gives. We want to engage more people and make it exciting and interesting. So Eric's going to really talk about, if you're trying to reach new people and not go to your core base, how are you successful in creating that message? And then lastly, on April 12th, Kimbia is going to do a webinar to really walk everyone through the nuts and bolts of how to use the system, so that you're feeling as comfortable as you can on Kimbia when Valley Gives happens. And the registrations will be coming out. I think we'll be sending out the registration or turning on the registration and sending out an email for the millennial one today or tomorrow. And then the others will be on the Community Foundation Valley Gives website, and on a rolling basis. What we did last year, and we're going to do again this year, is encourage all of you to have a Valley Gives event, either before or during the day. Last year, the Community Foundation had some tables of our own. We are not going to do that. We really want to sort of highlight organizations in the Valley who are participating in Valley Gives. And we're going to be providing basically a tabling kit. So t-shirts, a table skirt that would say Valley Gives, and some material so that when you're doing it, you actually can be seen as participating in Valley Gives. So there'll be more information coming out about that shortly. But we will list, just like we did last year, the events on the Valley Give website and then push it out to media. Last year, local media definitely made an effort to reach out and cover some stories in terms of people who are doing events, either tabling events or fuller events in the community. And we want to raise that awareness up both for Valley Gives, but also for your organizations. So that was highly successful. And then Community Foundation representatives, including our board members, are going to come out and visit, which we also did last year. And I think this might be the last slide. So looking at next steps, registration opens tomorrow, February 3rd. You can find it on our website. We're going to send out an email. Look at our blog, or if you're subscribed to the blog, you'll just get it. It'll go to Facebook and Twitter. So there should be many ways to find the registration link. Once you register and complete registration, you can start customizing your profile page. I highly recommend attending the trainings. And again, whichever one makes sense for your organization, whomever in your organization you think should go. So it doesn't always have to be you or the same person. And then just start planning. So as we get out the information about prizes, you can start strategizing. And I think that's it. Just to reiterate, we're going to have the two websites. Really, the top one is the one that you should most likely be going to well into April. And there's my contact information and Margaret's contact information with this phone number. And Margaret, do you have questions?
We have questions. The first one is asking about peer fundraising, and will people have their own profile pages for your organization?
So peer fundraising, this came up at the in-person one as well. That's an open question at the moment. So we tried it last year with Rezu. I will say that I think peer fundraising is a powerful tool and definitely a way of the future. The idea being that peer fundraising lets organizations get beyond their circles. And for those who are not familiar with it, it really is a way of getting individuals who are connected to their family and friends through social media around the world. They push out their message and they become the face for your organization. So people are donating to them and those donations pass through to the organization. So we did it last year. Rezu actually had a technical glitch which was frustrating for some organizations. And without getting too much in the weeds, basically if a donation was made to a peer fundraiser who is organizing in behalf of an organization, that organization, if they're trying to get a match, the donations didn't count to the match. And that was something we hadn't anticipated, and it was, I think, frustrating for a lot of people. So we don't fully understand the dynamic behind peer fundraising with Kimbia. We're still in conversation with them. It's also an additional module. So this morning I got an email saying that they were discussing it and were going to get back to us. So right now we're not offering peer fundraising for this Valley Gives. For timing and for rollout, it might be too much. If we can do it, we'll definitely let everybody know and we'll send out an email and be really clear about it. For right now, I would just assume that it's not happening unless you hear otherwise. But it's something that we want to figure out. And if we can't do it for this year, we definitely want to do it for next year.
Okay, now we have a couple of questions about trainings. Will video or any of the information from the in-person trainings be available online? And also, are any of the subsequent trainings mandatory?
Good questions. None of the subsequent trainings are mandatory. This was really the overview orientation was the only one. I would say that I would highly recommend participating in the Kimbia one, if nothing else, just so you can get the direct information from Kimbia staff about how the platform works. But it really is up to you and your organizations. They'll be limited by space. We've got bigger spaces than others. And I will say we're going to be doing another in-person orientation in Greenfield somewhere in the next few weeks just because there's a high demand. And Margaret and I were talking that we want to acknowledge that the trainings, there's no sessions that are in Franklin County, and that really is not a function of desire, but more that we haven't been able to find a space that's big enough, except at GCC, and that has its limitations sometimes. So we're aware of that, and we appreciate everyone traveling where need be. And then in terms of the trainings being online, if there's PowerPoints, they'll all be there. We're still trying to figure out the logistics. Last year, we were able to film some and post them as videos or as audio and slide PowerPoint projections. So where we can capture them, we will. The logistics is a little quirky. But at minimum, if there's a PowerPoint, those PowerPoints will be online on the website.
Okay, this question regards donors. If donors can give without creating an account, do the organizations they donate still get contact information such as names, addresses, and emails so that they can personally thank them?
Yes. The only thing I was saying with the not creating an account is it had been if you were doing advance giving with Rezu, and this is 2014, so it wasn't even last year, they had to create an account. So for Rezu last year and for Kimbia, you can just go in and type in your name, type in your credit card information, identify the organization, all the things that you would normally do on an online transaction. But all that information about the donor like I said, is available in real time from your profile page. So you just click on a link and it'll show you a spreadsheet that is exportable. So you can pull that into whatever kind of system you have, so you can get it offline and into your computers in your offices.
Okay, this one's asking you to clarify the definition of a unique donor. If John Smith donates and he's got a South Hadley address and a Visa card and a phone number, and another John Smith donates from a different address, same credit card or phone number, he is not a unique donor?
Say the last part again. Same credit card and
Same credit card or phone number, but a different address. Is he not unique because the address is the same?
so this is exactly why we wanted to clarify it. I think what we come down to, it's less about the data points, and it's, are there two John Smiths or one John Smith? If John Smith is trying to be two people, but it's the same real human being, then it's only one person. That's what we wanted to clarify, that it's got to be, the intent is we're trying to reach real people who are donating to real organizations about real causes. And as we sort through all the questions, which is what we did last year, really that's the heart of it. So that'll be the question we're asking. Is this it's a one person, or is this, you know, multiple people? If there's two John Smiths, then they're two individuals. If it's one John Smith trying to be multiple people, then it's still one person.
Okay, this question has to do with donations. The Jewish community has to provide donation levels in increments of $18. Can you work around that? And then the other question subsequently is, can they set their own donation amounts or levels?
Right. So what I understand from Kimbia is that the donation amounts will be set. What I don't know is if there's an other. So I can confirm that. Margaret and I can check into that to see if there's an other. I would say in terms of the $18 requirement, if you want to call or email us offline, we can have a conversation. But as of now, as I understand it from Kimbia, is the donation levels will be set and they'll hold across all the profiles. So really the outstanding question, is there another category when they actually make their payment? I'm thinking not, but we can confirm that.
This question is asking, what does audited or reviewed financials mean? Most small organizations do not have audited financials.
Margaret does not want to answer that one, even though she's the expert on it. So first, audits do cost money, and not all small organizations, you're correct, have to do that. So if an audit's not required, it's a matter of having an external review. So it's not sufficient, I don't believe, you can just nod at me, to have a board member say these are our audited financials. There has to be some kind of external review.
Yeah, there has to be a reviewed financial of some sort.
Right. And if you have detailed questions like that, just give us a call and we can clarify. It's not intended to be a barrier. It's just that it's required both for Kimbia and Community Foundation in terms of tracking the tax donations and being accountable for the flow of money.
Okay, this question is a Kimbia question. Actually, the next few are. Can donations be set up on a recurring basis so that they start on Valley Gives Day on the 2nd and continue to process on the 2nd of each month through the Kimbia platform? And if it can happen that way, does the platform rate stay the same each month or does it change?
Good question. So I would say that having recurring gifts is definitely the way to go. That's, I think, where any organization would want to be in terms of donors. I have asked that question. I don't have an answer yet. And it's part of a larger point that someone might be thinking and hasn't asked yet, which is when we started Valley Gives in 2012, one of the value adds the foundation was able to offer was that if people participated in Valley Gives, they got the use of the Razoo platform at that point all year long. So if you didn't have a way of capturing donations online, that could serve as your online platform. Kimbia's model is different, where they really focus, they're a bigger company, and so one of their product lines, so to speak, is Giving Days. And then they have, they serve as fundraising platforms for larger organizations. And we're in discussion now about how to make it so that if you're an organization participating in Valley Gives, you get to use your profile page all year long. I know that's something that's important to all the participating organizations. It's also important to us. Surprisingly, no one's ever asked Kimbia that, so they're talking amongst themselves, and we're waiting to hear back as to what they think and can do for us. So that's one of those things that we will put out there and let people know. It connects to the recurring donations as well, because at this point, donations are on May 2nd. If it was that you could only make a donation on May 2nd and there's no recurring functionality, what I would just say is that's the starting point for engaging donors and really sort of the stewardship and helping. You always want to grow your donors from $10 donors to $50 donors to $100 donors. And in a similar way, converting them from a one-time donor to a recurring donor is really part of the work of shepherding that relationship with your donors. So while I'm hoping we can offer it, if we can't, it really is something that I think organizations should think about doing.
Another question regarding Kimbia, will PayPal work for donations on Kimbia?
Good question. I don't know. We'll check that out and post it on the FAQ. From what I've seen, it's just credit card and debit. But we'll confirm that and put it in the FAQ. Good question.
This person says that last year they had somebody who was mistakenly charged twice for their donation. If that's the case, is Kimbia's policy that there are no refunds still in effect for that particular situation?
I think if it's a mistake, they would reverse it. I know that I would advocate on any organization's behalf that it get reversed. So I think irreversibility is more about we've changed our mind as opposed to a mistake.
And this person was on the Kimbia page and couldn't figure out how to sign up or start building their page.
That is because the Valley Gives page within Kimbia is not public yet. It'll go live next Friday, so on the 10th. Right now, there's the framework of it, so the masthead and the navigation buttons, but there's no organizations in it. So we didn't want to make it public until registration happened. So what you'll see on Kimbia now is just sort of Kimbia's other stuff. Once you start the registration process and then you complete it, you'll get the email giving you your link to start your profile page, and that's where it'll send you right to the place where you need to work on things.
And that's all.
Great. Well, it is 11:22, so for the record, we're ending 8 minutes early, which is great. The one thing I want to just let you know is we're going to send out an email somewhere in the next couple hours just asking you to fill out a quick form so that since this was mandatory, we can track everybody. Sometimes email addresses are not as instructive. So we're going to ask for your name and email and organization so we can just have that in the record and make sure that everyone who sat through this and learned a lot gets credit for learning a lot. And I just want to, in signing off, thank you all for participating. And just if you have questions, feel free to email Margaret or I. We are sincerely trying to make this work as best we can and as smoothly as we can for everybody so that you guys get money and the Valley does as well as it can. So have a great day and thank you for sitting in with us. Take care.